All right, everybody, greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is June 7th, 2021, and this is our 100th episode. If you can believe it, we actually made it to episode 100. I'm going to give a shout out to TK422. I see in here Benjamin Clark. Welcome. Ian, myself, Chuck Bam, and others. Hit that like button. It really helps. Sup and stuff just joined the room. How is everybody doing today? Today, we're going to have I guess, sort of a motivational, inspirational show. Getting to episode 100, that's not an easy thing. Like we talked about how starting Conflict Radio isn't that easy. You have to get over the anxiety of standing in front of a microphone. You have to put together all of the guests. You have to do all of this stuff, and it's not an easy thing, and something has to motivate you to actually do something like this. Something has to motivate you to do everything that you do in your life, and without motivation, there's what is there? There's depression and all kinds of things that just take you down a road that you don't want to go. So for this episode, I wanted to concentrate on self-analysis for daily inspiration, something that motivates you, how to get motivated, especially if you're feeling down and depressed and not in the right mood. So today I've got Josh Folds on. He wrote a book called Quotes for the Soul, Self-Analysis for Daily Inspiration. Josh is an author, head basketball coach, and banking executive. He has a passion for coaching on and off the court and living a life of service to others. Josh loves to inspire and motivate those around him while helping them achieve success outside of their comfort zone. Josh has been in the banking business for over 25 years and serves as a market president for a national bank. He has also been coaching basketball over the last 15 years and is currently leading a nationally ranked AAU team. He is married to his beautiful wife, Deanna, and they have 4 amazing children. Everyone, please welcome Josh. Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Hope everyone can hear me okay.
Yeah, you're coming in pretty good. Don M says hello. How's everybody doing? Josh, you wrote this book, and it said that you have 25 years of banking experience. Why don't you, I guess, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what motivated you to write this book?
Sure thing. So I've been in banking about 25 plus years or so. I actually went to college to get into broadcasting. So it's funny how karma is a big part of life, so to speak. I've always been coaching, and I've always had a passion to help others. And I started off selling a lot of credit cards for about 7 years or so. I'm that guy that called you at night while you're trying to eat some dinner and try to get your social, try to get your income, and then do a balance transfer after. And cold call for 9 to 10 hours a day while I try to work my way to pay through school. So that actually was a lot of fun. I've still been traumatized from all the pleasantries that were said to me during those phone calls. But that is where I really started to earn my stripes and learn about sales. And then I worked my way up, and fast forward now as I got a pretty big span. In fact, my role has changed in the past 6 months. So I currently lead about 13 states and a pretty big sales force for a pretty big bank. And so I'm always coaching. And I finally took the time, to sit down and put some thought back into a book on a project that took about 3 years or so. And I came up with 365 days of actual quotes that are my quotes. So this is not sort of a typical book where they maybe, go and borrow some quotes from somebody else. This is my own type of content that I put a lot of thought and time into. And my thought was, if I can inspire a single person, it was truly worth the time.
Well, that's true, and you mentioned just one person, right? And isn't that why we do this? It's easy to do the things that we do for ourselves, but that's not really what motivates us, right? What motivates us is the people around us. Isn't that true?
That's 1,000% true. And I think that the biggest joy is to make some type of impact on somebody else. And so I truly try to seek out folks that come from different backgrounds. I actually work with a lot of people that maybe went to Yale or they had gone, to Harvard, some type of school. That's perfect. I also like to break sort of what the norm is, right? And think outside of the box and give folks a chance that maybe haven't passed up on for all sorts of reasons. So I'm a big fan of, trying to meet somebody sort of where that they're at and to help them really dig down deep, have a sense of inspiration, and try to make a better go at things sometimes, right? So sometimes folks just truly need a second chance, or somebody needs sort of that shoulder that they can lean on at times. And maybe that sounds a little bit corny, but especially, to take a look at the pandemic and to look at the banking side of things, I had to help a lot of business owners keep their doors open, right? So you think about all the loans and all of the process on the PPP side, there were a lot of business owners calling me crying that just needed somebody to talk to. And so I think there's plenty of those types of opportunities as we look around us to lend that helping hand.
Well, that's pretty interesting. You bring that up. I guess you're kind of in charge of small businesses. I don't know what I can say
Yes.
or not over the air about your personal life, but you're the guy that the businesses would call that are going under because of all the lockdowns, right? So
Correct.
they're calling, they're talking to you, the banker, trying to get the PPP loans, right?
Correct. Yes.
So
yeah.
what was
and in
that
fact,
like?
Our bank did about 40,000 of those loans. So it was nonstop process for about a good 6 months.
I mean, on a daily basis, though, to be here, to be the recipient of that kind of negativity, I mean, it's not really negative like in that kind of way, but you're receiving everybody's, their negativity.
Yeah.
It's coming at you. How are you able to deflect away from all of that and go home and be happy in your day?
Yeah, so I do think that the work life and the personal life, that there does have to be some separation. And I could tell you that the early days of banking, and I call that my 20s and 30s, because since I'm in my 40s now, that was extremely difficult. But I've learned to have some discipline. I've learned to really manage a calendar and, to be very thorough about trying to use that calendar, of course, on the work side, but also the earmark time on the personal side. So I'm a pretty big stickler. I try to keep about a 7:30 to 6 o'clock type of schedule. That from 7:30 to 6, I'm here for you. I'm here to help as much as I possibly can. But past 6, I would like to have some type of respect that's family time. Now, during the times of PPP, the work calls at 7 o'clock at night and at 8 o'clock at night. And that's truly when you earn those clients for a lifetime, right? Because you're truly there for them in their moment of need. But that's not your typical type of situation. And I'm hoping now that we're finally getting to the other side of getting through the process on PPP and getting back to some sense of normalcy. So it's still an ongoing challenge, but I would say there has to be some type of discipline back in your day-to-day and back in your calendar.
All right. So you mentioned that you were the telemarketing guy, right?
Yep.
What was that like?
Yeah, so I worked in telesales for probably about 6 to 7 years or so, and I was trying to figure out a way to pay for school. So I basically had about $6 or $7 an hour to sell credit cards, through the phone, and that was before that the law changed. In fact, the law changed in 2013, and not to bore, the entire sort of the audience, so to speak. But in 2013, there was the TCPA Act, which is better known as the Do Not Call list. So now, if you're trying to call somebody and sell something over the phone, they can just simply tell you to take them off their list. So the entire sort of span of telesales came to a pretty big halt in 2013, and then that's when the company that I had been a part of got bought by Bank of America at the time, and then I chose to get into the retail side of banking.
I think the only thing people get calls for now is their vehicle warranty, right?
That's probably right. Yeah.
There's no call for that. There's no take me off the number for that.
No, there's not.
So I guess I was watching you do an interview where you were talking about your call sales. And the first thing that came to my mind was how I guess it could be very much like every single call you made is kind of like a task that we do in our daily life. If you were to, like you're going to get a lot of disappointment, right? Probably more than you had sales. You would get hung up on or name called or something.
Yeah.
It's probably no different in life. You try to do this, you try to do that, you try to do this, you try to do that, and you don't do it, or you don't have the motivation to do it, and then about 10% of the things that you truly aim to accomplish, you actually accomplish, right?
Yeah, so I was, probably the first 60 days or so, there have been a lot of folks that had tried to start the job and they turned over and quit. but I was that person that sort of thrived off the challenge. And it was the most challenging job I probably ever had before. But I really learned how to get into the conversation, how to have those conversation skills to try to turn a negative into a positive, how to be better at closing, and, sort of try to read that phone call since I can't see them face to face, but try to understand if I'm close to trying to get the sale over the finish line, right? And so it got to a point to where I had thrived on doing that, and I actually got really excited about trying to help and coach and teach, and they put me in charge of training. So then I got to train all of our new hires. And so that was a fun experience. So there was a lot of people that the turnover rate there was extremely high, but I thrived off the challenge, and I think it really helped me get established in how to speak to people.
All right. So what was your calling for this?
So I would tell you that my calling for this, a part of it comes from faith, and then a part of it comes just from my background, So I think that everyone has a story. And so I started up, probably about 7 years ago, so to have a basketball team. And my target on the basketball team was to look at risk youth. That started trying to get me to think about how can I really live a life of service to others, right? And I knew sort of in the back of my mind that there's all these motivational speakers out there, that there's all these different topics, and there's lots of books, and live your best life and feel your best today and all that stuff. And there's a lot of it that doesn't come through as a genuine type of approach. And so again, it's back to my commentary. My thought process was if I could help one kid, it was worth my time to start that basketball team. If I could help one person who's been struggling, maybe a certain quote that drives home or the questions that get them vulnerable, that's a win for me. I can care less about if I sell a bunch of books or not. I can care less about the money aspect. This is really about trying to help other people. And I think especially if you look at the past 12 to 18 months, just look at the negativity we've had to sort of been endured as a country. And it almost feels like at times that the world is cracking apart sort of at its seams. And so my basketball team is called Athletes of Influence. My publishing company is called Souls of Influence. So the common word there is influence. And so I had some down and out times in terms of high school. So I was a basketball player. I don't know, average 25 to 30 points a game. That's a typical story. Senior year, had a really bad injury. Was out for about 17 to 18 months or so. Basketball days were pretty much done. My parents had gone through a pretty tough time, and they split up for a while. I started hanging around a lot of kids I shouldn't have, started seeing a lot of things I shouldn't be seeing. And I was in a pretty bad place. And that's where I found myself. That's where I found God. And I really got into this aspect of motivation. And I can attribute a lot of that to being very tight still at the time in terms of my father. And then I started to get active in a local church and started bringing all my issues in front of that pastor, who's still a very close friend of mine. And then, fast forward to social media in terms of the LinkedIn platform, I started doing something every single Monday, Motivation Monday. And now I've been doing it every Monday for the last 6 years straight. And I think we've grown our follower base now to about 25,000 followers. I can care less if that's 25 million, but there's a good chunk of audience there that every Monday I'm putting something out there just to get their week started. And so that finally got me to the point, well, heck, why don't I write a book? If I'm doing this every single Monday, why don't I put something back in book format to be able to have something tangible to give folks out there and find an opportunity to sort of inspire them.
So what do you do on Mondays that draws 25,000 people?
So all I simply do is just put up sort of a quote for that week and then a quick sort of thought or another type of question or maybe some type of graphic out there so that they have a visual to help them think differently or to help sort of challenge where their thinking is. And so, I think the challenging part there is to keep the content fresh. But, so there's some stuff on there that I have as my quote, or there's some things on there that maybe I see someone else post and simply share it back, but add some commentary to it.
All right. So I guess, can I read some of these quotes here? Now,
yeah, please,
I want to tell everybody that what this book is you go through the book and it has every day of the year in there. And Josh sent me a copy, and my wife and I have actually been taking turns doing this every day. Like say, for instance, she does June 1st, I'll do June 2nd, then she does the 3rd, I'll do the 4th, that sort of thing. And we can kind of read each other's, I guess, comments in the book. It's like a write-in book. We keep a pen there and stuff. You write in it. And here, I'll just turn to the 7th, which is today. And the quote for today is, "Your fragrance for life should be the smell of progress." Now, where would you come up with some of these quotes? Like, would you just think about them every day, and your wife was like, "Oh, you got to write those down," or?
Yeah, so, that starts to fall back to the other side of the story, right? And it's like everybody has a story. And I've always come from a place to be very vulnerable. I'm an open book. And I actually went through a period of time during the time of getting this book finalized where I was having a really graphic dreams. I was having a lot of deep dreams about things in terms of the afterlife. I was having a lot of anxiety about the type of industry that I sort of work in. So I had a lot of sleepless nights. And there is some nights that I would just grab a cup of coffee. I would be up from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. or so. And I would just start thinking about what's coming to mind as soon as I snap out of the panic attack and dream, so to speak. But what starts to come to mind? And, so I would have a play on words there. And so this starts to get back to thinking about these types of concepts. Like, how do you surround yourself then with great people? There's a lot of people that say that they keep a small type of circle, and I tend to do the same thing. But is the environment, is the ambiance that you're trying to create sort of around you one that starts to instill confidence, one that instills you pushing things forward? And it's back to my thought here that everybody who is listening to this show right now has a purpose. You're alive one time. The death rate is 100% in life, right? So we're only here for a short amount of time. Why not make the best of it? Try to find a sense of happiness. Try to give back and serve to your people sort of around you and the community that you serve. Find what that drive is in you. And sometimes it takes a life event. I sort of had a life event where I have a stay-at-home wife. I have 4 kids. I also have a lot of other kids that I try to help and support. I have another gentleman who's been off my basketball team, enjoying my program since 5th grade, and he's been living with me for the past.
I lost you there. Are you there?
So
there you go. You're back.
I'm doing some life events that have impacted why I'm doing those things. And so that's how that a lot of those quotes sort of came to me. It was either through sort of experiences that I had, or maybe it was somebody that I talked to that day. And, so there's a variety of ways where these quotes sort of just came to me. And then I would just simply have a question or two to get people vulnerable, to get them to look at themselves back in the mirror. And then the best way to use the book really is to have a pencil, because this is not a one and done. This is something where you can fill it out and then have a look back, and hopefully see some progress back in your life.
Yeah, like go through it the next year, right?
Sure.
Yeah. It's pretty neat. What's your favorite quote in the book?
I would have to go to February 1st, and it's probably the shortest one in there too. Discipline determines direction. I'm a stickler for habits. I'm a stickler for some type of routine and some type of rhythm, right? So there has to be something back in your life that if you want to do something, you got to put a plan in place. You got to put some timelines in place. You got to use some, you go back on the calendar, it's back in your phone. Set some type of alert back in your phone. If you're going to hop on the Peloton for 30 minutes a day, do you have that schedule? Have some type of discipline to help you get to where you're trying to get to, because all of us can say, here's our dreams, here's everything that we want to do. But if we don't have discipline to what we aspire to do or be, we're that hamster back in the wheel. And that's a tough place to be.
I guess I'll throw this out here because it's just to kind of show that we are. Do you think that there's meaning in the dreams that you have?
Yeah, so that's a tough one, right? And so that starts to get deeper into the faith battle. And I feel like at times, and this can go off on my soapbox, but the devil, can sort of play tricks on you, right? And sort of know when and that you're vulnerable. And I was in sort of a vulnerable state. I had the same job for about a decade, and then I had an opportunity to change jobs. And I had a lot of anxiety in that. I had a lot of fear in that. And in fact, it took my oldest son, who said, "Dad, do you actually read the stuff that you write? And especially if you look at the LinkedIn post, do you really think about what you put on there? You say great things don't happen unless you get outside of your comfort zone. But yet, Dad, I see you stuck in your comfort zone every day." And that was really sort of like an epiphany for me, where here that I had my youngest son that I had at an age that I have been extremely young, teaching me and having me sort of hit that pause button and think. And, I had went through some therapy also. I had some Christian, sort of friends that would come to me that I could trust to share my story with and know that they're not going to judge me. And I was doing a lot of praying, and it's crazy because since I went through my counseling, which is it's probably about 6 weeks or so, I never had a dream again. I've had dreams, but never had a graphic dream about death or about the afterlife. And it's hard for me to pinpoint why that is, except to be focused on God. But it's been at least probably a good year. And I sleep perfect now. I don't take any type of medicine or anything to help me sleep. And it's crazy. And so I have that gut feeling that I know that there's something bigger out there, right? And so I'm trying to take advantage of this opportunity that I had mentioned that I'm in my 40s. So I see myself at the halftime of this game of life, so to speak, and I have the second half to finish the game strong. And my plan is living a life of service to others and doing just that.
And that's the trick, right? To break out of your comfort zone. You're not going to do better things than what you're doing now if you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And there's a lot of addiction in life too, right? So some people get addicted to drugs, some people get addicted to drinking. And just back to me being extremely vulnerable, I was really into video games, and I'm really competitive, and I was really focused on sports games, and so it's back to your question about how do I keep balance from all the stress and challenges of trying to juggle a lot of things. I would come home late at night, would wait for everybody to go to sleep, and hop on video games for 5-6 hours, and I got a rush off that competition, of trying to be ranked or trying to go play in tournaments or, something to keep the competitive fire going. And that can also be a challenge, right? Because that has an impact on a lot of things. And so there's a lot of life events that really brought me to where that I'm at now. I'm still not a perfect person, a perfect puzzle. I still call myself broken, and by the grace of God, I'm saved, but I'm trying to be at the stage of life to really find those opportunities to help others. I mean, especially as you look at the youth, find me that child that comes from that broken family or that is really struggling in school and find that opportunity to kind of give them a helping hand.
All right. So let's break that down a little bit. You said that, I guess, God is kind of, it's a big part of your life, right? You believe in God, you believe in we're created in His image, Adam and Eve, that sort of thing, right?
Yep.
All right. So what would you say to the people that are listening that don't believe, that I guess, maybe they don't believe in a God, or they believe in a different God, or maybe they're not sure what to think. How would, let me put it this way. What do you think about UFOs and UFO disclosure and everything that's going on with the media exploding all over UFOs right now?
Sure.
How does that fall into a Christian mindset, whereas, aliens from another planet could be visiting Earth? You think that if it's revealed that that's happening, that's going to crush the religious system that we have on Earth today?
Yeah. So I have a couple thoughts on that. So I have a lot of friends that they don't have a belief, right? So they are probably leaning more in terms of the atheist side. In fact, some of my closest friends sort of start to lean that way, or they're still not really down a certain path, right? They're too caught up in what we call day-to-day living that they don't give that a lot of thought. And there's other folks that tell me, Josh, like, why do you always think about death? And quite, to be extremely candid, I think about death probably on, I'd say once or twice a day. Now, it's not to the point anymore to where I have those dreams anymore, but it's always in the back of my mind since I'm curious, right? So I'll try to look at things in terms of online, and I'm fascinated with these people that said they were dead for 2 hours and they went to heaven and saw their family, and all that. That stuff fascinates me. And so as I think about the UFOs, that fascinates me also. I'm a very curious person, and so I want to thank you for providing a platform for people to explore the curiosity. But I also have a lot of respect for all the walks of life out there, and I'm definitely not that Christian snob that thinks it's my way is better than all of yours, and I'm going to be right and you're going to be wrong, right? So, I believe that there is a God that is out there that loves everybody and that wants the best from everybody, and that would want us to seek out people to be able to find an opportunity to spread that gospel and at least give them that opportunity to make their own type of decision, not shove it down their throat. And if they choose to truly believe and to have that walk, that's awesome. There's people celebrating in heaven for that. If they choose not to, that again is up to them. They shouldn't be outcasted or chastised, because for a lot of people, it takes a life event. If you look at most churches, most of the people in the church are older, right? So it always seems like when people get towards the latter part of life, or call it, I don't know, 70s, 80s, and so on and so forth, that you start to become real and real, or that death is near. That's a fact of reality. And people are looking to either make a choice at that point or keep their belief system, on how that they view things as. And so I don't ever want to be that person to point a finger and say that my way is better than others. I personally have gone through a lot of life experiences to where I truly believe without a shadow of any doubt that there is a higher being out there. And I believe that when you perish, you go on somewhere forever. And I believe that that's either heaven or that's hell. Now, I'm not going to know if I'm 100% right until that day comes, right? But I do believe that there also has to be something else out there. I think that if you look at the galaxies and just this notion of all of us are floating in space right now, that is mind-boggling to me if you really process it that way. And so I do think that there's got to be something else out there. And I think maybe that's already been proven. Maybe that's already been explored. You can watch the videos and go through the news and all that stuff. And I would think that the government knows exactly what's going on. And I do start to read into the conspiracy theories and all that stuff, because that stuff makes me curious. And so I think, that all of us just need to keep a certain level of respect for what we believe in. And all of us, of course, that were raised different also. I had been fully raised in a Southern Baptist home where, you go to Bible study in terms of Wednesday nights and you go to church on Sunday mornings. And if you weren't at church Sunday morning, then your parents are giving you a talking to. I went to a Christian school for 9 years where when I acted up, I went downstairs and the principal paddled me and told me that Jesus loves me and then would spank the crap out of me. So I had it pretty much paddled into me for about a good 9 years.
Do you think that the I guess the youth today are being raised without? I mean, obviously we're seeing it all around the country, right? Like you have school shootings and crazy things happening. Do you think that has to do with the fact that there's groups out there that are trying to eliminate religion from children's lives?
So I do believe that could be a part of it. I think, in terms of my personal life and in terms of experiences and close friends who's gone through tragedy and has gone through a lot of challenges of life, I think a lot of this stuff does start at home. I think it does have to do with your upbringing. I think it does have to do with, do you have some type of foundation? Do you have some type of base? What are these children watching? What are they listening to? I also think, this is going to sound contrary to what I just said on the video game side, but I do think that these video games, right? So I'll be the first to tell you, I have a little guy, he's 6, and he loves Fortnite, and then he'll be like, Dad, can we play a game of Call of Duty? And then I'm second guessing, should I be letting him run around with me with a machine gun mowing down people? So I do think that there is some of this stuff that can be sort of embedded at an early age. And I think especially now, as you look at social media, it's extremely challenging to be a parent. So if there's parents out there, I'm sure that there's lots of them back in your audience, it's not easy. And so I'm not one that says you have to sort of hide them from everything, because, again, I'm walking proof of a child who went to a Christian school for 9 years and then went from Christian school to a public school, and that was extremely difficult, extremely challenging. Seeing kids doing things in the bathroom as far as drug use and cursing, and I'm like, hey, you can't do that, and trying to be that Bible nerd that just saw the other side of sort of what the world is.
I'm sure they picked on you profusely.
Exactly. Yeah. I can tell you that my freshman year, I'm still traumatized from. So I think it's important to have children to have an understanding of good, sort of good and bad, so to speak. But I also do think that it's back on the parents to be able to at least, have some type of structure at home, to try to keep the kids on the good and narrow, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that you got paddled in school. Could you imagine if the schools out there did that to kids today?
Oh, I can only imagine. They'd probably have a gun or knife in their face. Yeah.
So, what about the people I could see people all over the channel now are saying, well, the government knows all about aliens and UFOs, but they'll never disclose it because they control people through religion, and therefore exposing that the aliens and UFOs are from another planet or something will crash their religious system and then their avenue to control people. What would you say to that?
I don't know. It's a tough one. So, I mean, my just thought is also on the purpose of life. If it's truly for us just to live, 70 to 90 years, some people make it over 100. It's pretty rare. And then you just die, and that's it. That's back to this notion of that we're all in some type of simulation almost, right? And so we're that the government's in control of what the game is, and we're just a sort of a pawn in that game. And then as soon as the game's over, there's another player that comes aligned up to play, so to speak, right? And so I just wrestle with what would the whole purpose be, like, And then I also always look at, I have several children, so I've watched them be born, and I'm just fascinated to just think about how a female can have a human being inside of them and watching a birth, right? And sort of watching all the variety of animals in life. Just sort of all these different things that just drive you to this belief that there has to be something else. And yes, I know there will always be another side where they'll try to prove things out through science and all that. But I just can't comprehend what the purpose of life is if we're just going to live, be born, die, and that's it. It's just, I don't know. It's hard for me to process that.
Paul Beska says, I'm always warning my kids about how much evil is in the world and not to trust anybody. Do you find that that's true? That there's obviously there's a lot of evil in the world, and the more you do for other people, the more evil's going to come at you to try to stop you. Do you feel like you have to deflect more of the evil away from you and your family as you go about trying to do good things for your community?
So I would tell you that Paul, he makes a great point, and I've been burned a lot more times than I can probably count, right? So people that you think are your friend and you get burned, or you got people talking trash behind your back, or, and so I'll point back to my oldest son again. He said, Dad, if you don't have haters, you're probably not doing something right. And I said, son, I never thought about it that way, right? But, this is the day and age where people check your social feed just to see if you've lost, not to see if you've won, right? So people are wanting downfall more than they're wanting you to win. Now, that might sound pretty harsh, but that's sort of my view on things. It's very rare for somebody just to call me or text me and say, Josh, what can I do to help you today? But I do that because I have a serving heart, not to even want anything back at all, because I can care less about that. I just choose to have a giving heart, and I believe back to my faith, and I'm storing my riches up in heaven, and that I'll finally be a rest up there and a be peace up there. But while I'm down here, I have work to do. And yes, there's still going to be a lot of evil. I try to ground my kids in faith also, but it's back on them, right? So I'm not going to shove it down their throat. I try to get them to come to church. If they choose to come to church, great. If they choose not to, it's not to word that they're grounded or anything like that. So I keep pretty a loose sort of household where there's a good foundation of faith there, but I'm never going to be one to shove it down their throat. And that's sort of my mantra there, is I'm never going to be that person to force my beliefs on somebody else.
All right.
And that could be my own family.
So let me ask you this. You consider yourself a pretty successful guy, right? How are you? I
think so. I don't know.
So how are you able to go through life being successful in both business and personal life without becoming, I guess, like J.R. Ewing? You know who J.R. Ewing is?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Um,
Like how do you go and there's always somebody trying to knock you down, right? They got to knock you down, or they want your position, or they want something that you have. How do you go through life not being J.R. Ewing?
yeah. So I would just mention on that I just had a lot of obstacles that I had to overcome, right? And I had to also work my way up the corporate ladder coming from a different background, not fitting what the norm was, and always viewed about, okay, well, he didn't go to such and such school, or he doesn't come from this type of background, or have this many years of experience. And so I've just tried to find an opportunity to stay, to sort of stay the type of course that, I've been placed on, so to speak. And then find ways to make sure that I have really good outlets to, again, balance my stress out, or to balance things out so where that I'm not fully consumed by the banking business, or fully consumed by running a sports program, or fully consumed about, trying to find ways to make sure I spend time with every member of my family, so to speak. And so, again, I keep bringing it back to structure, that I'm extremely disciplined, and it took me a long time to kind of get there. But I have a pretty good process in place right now. The downfall of that is I live and die by what's on my calendar. So if I get thrown a curveball, it can throw my day off, so to speak, because I'm very much like, here's what I'm doing for the next 2 weeks. And so I like to spend time to plan. I like to spend time to be forward thinking, and to have a sense of being proactive instead of that hamster back in the wheel again. It's just trying to react to everything.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about coaching and how you motivate children today. Now, how old do you say the kids were? 12, 13, or?
Yeah. So we started off with a third grade program, and now at this point we have about 35 kids in the program, ages 14 to 17.
All right, and you've been doing it how long?
I've been doing it for 7 years.
Okay, and have you noticed how long have you been coaching though?
Yeah, so coaching sports probably about 15 years, and then on the travel side of sports the past 7 years.
All right. So what kind of difference have you seen in the 12 to 13-year-old kids over the last 15 years?
Lots of it. Something called Snapchat and TikTok, right? But
Yeah.
I would tell you that it is extremely challenging to be a coach because there's just a lot of distractions. There's a lot of noise. Back in my day of playing, you had a beeper. Mom would drop me off at the park where I played for 5 or 6 hours on a Saturday and Sunday. When I got the beep that there was a certain code on there that it's time to come home and have dinner, and that's time to come home and have dinner. Nowadays, it's extremely difficult to run a practice and have those kids only focused on what you're trying to teach them, and then what they actually take in and put back into practice, so to speak. The great thing about the program is there's a tutoring side to it also. So we look for those kids that have some potential, yes, on the basketball court, but maybe their grades aren't at the place that they should be, that once they get into high school, you have to maintain a certain type of grade point average to play. So they do also get the tutoring time. And I've had players that have come to me and say, Coach, had it not been for this program, I would be out probably in some type of gang right now. And so that's the struggle right now, is you have kids that come from tough backgrounds, from tough areas. In fact, if I look at my 9th grade team, 8 out of my 10 players do not have a father figure right now. That could be because the father's not around. Maybe the father's in prison. Maybe the father has passed away. They don't know who the dad is. So I'm basically a father to those 8 players, right? So they're looking to me to be that role model. They're looking to me to be that sort of center of influence back to them to help them have that structure back in life. And so it is definitely a full-time job. I had a player call me one time on a Friday night. It was 11 o'clock at night. His mom's boyfriend was beating her up, and I heard screaming in the background. He said, Coach, I need you to come pick me up right now because my mom's boyfriend's here, and her face is getting all messed up. So I come across some very challenging types of situations that it is definitely bigger than basketball. But if I can help one child, sort of find their way out of the misery they might find themselves in, then it's worth my time. The flip side of all that is I have to do a lot of fundraising so that I can help pay for all the tournaments because it's expensive, pay for all the travel. And it's gotten to a point now to where 2 of my teams are nationally ranked in the Southeast, top 20 team. And I have a handful of kids that will go on to play college basketball. And so it's definitely been something for me that it's been the biggest joy probably of my life outside of my family, is to be able to help these kids.
Have you ever coached any kids that are in the NBA today?
Not yet, because the oldest group now is going into their sophomore year. So I do have some prospects, and I'm hoping at some point to say that that's the case. But we'll find out here shortly in a couple of years, since it's getting to a point now where there's a lot of these players that are only going to college for a single year, and then that's it. And they're either trying to go play somewhere, in terms of the G League or the pros, or going overseas somewhere. But coaching has definitely been a huge passion of mine. So I'm either coaching at the office or I'm coaching on the court.
Do you feel like our kids today, I guess the kids that you're coaching today, are more stressed than the kids that you coached 10, 15 years ago?
1,000%. Yeah, 1,000%. And so I would also tell you that the kids in the age now where they're starting to get involved in sex is seeming to start at a younger age also, just in terms of the curiosity there. And so I worry about that. In fact, there's been some other really good players involved in other programs that have gotten girls pregnant, age 14, 15. And so I worry about that with a few of my players, because as their popularity grows at school because of how good they are, in sports and what have you, so does all of the amount of distractions around them as well. We've had some challenges with kids smoking weed. We've had some challenges with vaping going on, and so I don't want to be viewed as just, someone else to slap them on the wrist, so to speak, if they're doing something bad. I truly want to be there to sort of hear them out, and try to help them. And it takes a village. So I try to keep in touch and talk to their teachers. I try to keep in touch and talk to the school coaches. They'll call me if someone got in a fight at school or someone took somebody's AirPods at school. And so it truly takes a village. And I have, of course, a lot of support to help me. In terms of my wife, she's been the team mom for the past 7 years, and she truly is a mother figure to a lot of these players as well, too. So it's a big program, but it's a big undertaking, and we're busting at the seams now. I have a lot of kids trying to join our program, and I just don't have the funding to do it. So I'm trying to apply for grants and do some other things so that I can, keep building our program to maybe someday I am serving, kids call it 6 to 17 years old.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I would imagine that the kids' problems are the ones that stress you out the most as you're laying at home in bed, right?
Of course. And so the team name, again, is Athletes of Influence. And it's simple as I truly want them to be able to have a sense of influence on the court and off the court. Because back to my point, a lot of these kids are the popular kid at school. So everyone else is going to be looking at them to see how they act, to see how they talk, to see what they do. I'm a fan of hip-hop, but their hip-hop seems to be a little rougher than my hip-hop sort of back in the day. And I just simply ask, hey, if you want to play hip-hop, that's fine, but can you at least get the clean version on? Doesn't have to be N-word and F-word every 30 seconds. And I also try to teach them how to be respectful of females as well, because there's a lot of these songs also that start to have some influence on how they should be viewing females that I personally don't agree with, So there's a lot of teaching moments for sure.
I mean, you have to admit that the stuff today, the music and the TV shows and, even the video games and everything, it seems like they're programming our children at a younger age. And when I say they, I'm talking about, I guess, especially on this channel, I'm talking about the deep state, right?
Sure.
they and a lot of people could take that as the evil side, how evil is coming in and becoming more and more and more in everybody's faces at a younger age. What advice could you give your parent, or could you give parents out there who maybe have a kid that's spending way too much time on the computer or video games and anything else? I mean, I've seen some videos. You take a tablet away from a 4-year-old and it's an absolute nightmare. Like what? I mean, what can we do about this?
Yeah, so I'm here again to say that I'm not a perfect saint, so to speak, and I'll use my 6-year-old again. So he has an iPad, and he goes on and watches all the stuff off of YouTube and Spy Ninjas, I think it's called, or something like that. He's extremely curious. And he's watching videos on Fortnite and the latest skins coming out and sort of all this stuff. And it's mind-boggling how these games, back to your point, have really taken control of our children. I mean, it's fascinating to me, and they've made billions of dollars off it as well, too. We do try to have a limit on how much use and how much time is spent back on those types of things. But yeah, as soon as you try to take it away, it's World War III sometimes. So there has to be a balance there, and I think we as parents can always do a better job to make family time. There sort of had been a thing called Sunday dinner, sort of back in my day, but that seems like a thing of the past, right? And it's sort of tough. There's a Christian song by Casting Crowns, and again, I'll preface, I'm not here to shove this down your throat, but it's called House of Our Dreams. And if you listen to the words of that song, and I'm a big baby, I tend to have church a lot of times back in my car because I do a lot of driving, and I have a lot of time to sort of think. And I cry almost every time the song plays, because what it basically gets at is we're consumed with social media and technology, and you can have a house full of people in a house of your dreams. But if you look at the communication from a verbal standpoint, it's not there. And you have children that are in their rooms that are basically broken inside because we as parents are not taking the time to break those walls down and start to understand them better, or even have a conversation with them, because we're consumed sort of back in our own life. And so I would encourage the audience to listen to the House of Our Dreams. No, I don't get paid any royalties to have you look up the Casting Crowns group, but it's just those types of songs get to me. And I listen to hip hop, I listen to Christian, I listen to some country, and I try to be open-minded about the music that I'm also hearing. But there's all this outside influence that is coming in at a rapid pace. You have to, back to my point on the quote side, have some discipline in how you spend that family time.
You gotta. It's gotta be rough, man. I would tell people, you gotta get out. It's easy for parents to be lazy too, right? To just let the kid sit in their room on their iPad or on their video games all day and just leave me alone. I'm gonna sit in here and watch American Idol on the TV all night long. Right? I mean, it's easy for the parents to do that. The trick is you got to get out there. You got to drag the kids out of the house, kicking and screaming, and go fishing or something, right?
Yeah. That's the hardest part, is how do you shut down the outside world and just have a conversation anymore, right? And I find myself doing it all the time too. In fact, I have a nickname at work called social clutter. And I laugh at it, but it's true. I have an Instagram feed coming out of my ears, and LinkedIn, Twitter. I mean, all these things, right? I'm trying to keep up to date on sports and the latest ways to run a practice and the latest plays to implement at practice for basketball, and then trying to keep up with banking and my family and all this stuff. So it's all these different channels are wrestling for our time. And while we get consumed in all that, we have actual physical people that are near us that want that type of interaction, but they're the ones that get pushed back in the line because we're so consumed with what's on that phone, so to speak. In fact, I do a whole lot of teaching in terms of the banking world. I am trying to push a concept out called social selling. And the concept is not new. It's been around now a couple of years, but I'm trying to get the banks now to fully adapt into social selling. And so what that basically means is there's nobody going into a bank anymore, right? And, in fact, if we were to start to talk about banking in terms of your audience and start to poll them on when's the last time they physically went into a bank, it's probably been quite some time. And so this whole notion about, there's studies out there saying that we are looking at our smartphones up to 300 times per day. That's insanity, up to 300 times per day. So when do you have time to do anything else? We're just consumed with constantly going back to seeing the next thing that pops up on your smartphone.
Yeah. You got to wonder how in the world we're going to get anything done in the future when all we're doing is just sitting around on our phones, staring at our phones, playing, scrolling Facebook and playing games all day long. We're really not gonna get anywhere as a society. Well, I'm gonna throw this out there. We got a ton of people in here now. I guess Hugh's here, Drunk Beer Barian is here, and TK. Let's see, Paul Beska made it in. How you doing, Paul? I saw Sapphire in here earlier. Let me scroll up. Sapphire Elf, how you doing? Sapphire is our Australian resident listening from Australia.
Awesome. That's a bucket list item for me. I love to go to Australia. So shout out to Australia.
Yeah, that's a long way,
Yeah.
That's definitely a long way. Somebody's talking about the highwaymen, I guess. I've never seen that. But there's a ton of people in here, so go ahead and hit that like button if you guys don't mind. If you have any questions for Josh, throw it up on the I guess the comment box, and we'll find it out. Sapphire Elf says, "Yeah, the information spin cycle, just chum cycle, just moves too fast. I think we haven't evolved to block it out." Do you think that the technology is out evolving our consciousness?
So I would say yes. And then, so it's funny to sort of bring that up. So I had always thought about, can I find an opportunity to hop on a cruise every 6 to 12 months? Because I used to view the cruise ship as an opportunity to sort of escape, right? You hop on that cruise ship, you go out and, and sort of explore a couple different islands or something like that. And now the cruise ships, as soon as you get on there, they get you to sign up to have the Wi-Fi package, right? So it's, how can you do anything now and be able to shut down life, right? So I think about my job, and I have a very pressing job in terms of meeting, sales numbers and all that stuff. I have to manage a lot of people, and I could put back on there that I'll be out of the office for the next 2 days. Yet people are still going to text message me. People are still going to send me a bunch of emails. And it's just back to my comment about the checking the phone to 250, 300 times a day. I have sort of an OCD on that, where I feel the need that even on my day off, I have to go back and check that email. So I do believe that the technology is outpacing us. In fact, I bring up a story that starts to hit home. I had a challenge on the Crackberry, which was the BlackBerry back in the day, where I lived in that thing for God knows how long, and it would always have a flashing red light. And the flashing light was always if you had an email. And I had a prior boss that was 7 days a week, so he would text me, call me Saturdays, Sundays, didn't really care about family time or any of that stuff. And there was one Sunday morning that I was getting ready for church, and I couldn't find my BlackBerry. And I literally had a child of mine that hid it from me and just said, "Dad, I wanted you to spend time with us today and not be on the phone." And I literally broke down and started crying because it hit home, and it really made me realize that I was living on my phone, that although I was finally saying I was going to spend physical time with my child, I was still having that phone in the other hand. And while I still haven't figured it out to be perfect now, because I still think about when, I try to take my daughter out to eat or something like that, we still always have that technology right by us. And so I do think that that's our competition, right, is back to my saying, and it sounds like I got to do a better job of taking it home, but I need to have some discipline and what that looks like. And it should be okay to put the phone on airplane mode or do something to where you can shut that down and at least give your attention to those that really mean the most to you.
Do you think our consciousness is what it's supposed to be? Like personally?
Yeah. That's a great way to think about it. I don't know, right? It's sort of like that we're living in this day and age. I'm trying to help my kids with this, and I see it through my basketball team all the time, is they want, as soon as the game's over, "Coach, did your wife get the highlights? Did somebody see my dunk? Did somebody see that three-pointer? Please have them send it to me." We're in this world now of getting sort of affirmed in the moment. Like I have to have somebody really affirm who I am or what I'm doing or my sense of identity, so that I can quickly get the highlight out on social media and get 100 likes or get 1,000 views or get more followers or, "Dad, this person's TikTok famous." It's changed so much now to where it's all about the latest and greatest moment. Who cares about what happened last week? It's what just happened in the last game that I want to make sure the whole world knows to see out there, right? And so I do think a lot of it is the conscious, and I do think that there's a lot of it that comes from the celebrities and stuff, right? So, I mean, the last night's a great example. Who in the world would ever think, you look at a Logan Paul fighting one of the best boxers to ever live. When on God's green earth would you see a YouTuber in a boxing match, right? And so yet it's like they keep saying, world famous on YouTube, 5 billion views, all this stuff, right? So social media has completely changed what the perspective is of self even. And I do think a lot of times people have an identity crisis because they're wrestling with who they are. And if I don't have somebody liking and commenting and sharing on what I'm doing, then I'm not worthier, so to speak, right? And I like your approach because I've heard you say it before. You're here to put out good quality content to help get people curious, to help people sort of find their pathway at times. And I'm doing the same thing on my end. We're going about it possibly a little bit different, but we're getting to the same place, it sounds like, right? And so it's not to make zillions of dollars. It's not to push a product or what have you. But there's just a lot of our youth that is being impacted in the wrong manner. And it's making it extremely difficult as a parent to get them off that.
Yeah, it definitely is. So I'm going to change gears a little bit. You said
Sure.
you are a banker for 25 years. So is it okay if we talk about that a little bit?
We can talk about anything you want. Sure.
All right. So if I ask you a question that you don't feel comfortable answering, just let me know. But I'm curious, being in the banking industry for 25 years, where do you think our economy is headed right now, financially? I know we're getting off topic, but I got to ask you. You're kind of it's kind of what you do.
No, that's fine. Sure. So the primary focus of my job is to really help a lot of business owners and to help them. That's viewed upon. There's a lot of banks, and I'll try not to bore people, that start to get into the segmentation of clients. So think about it as an airline, right? You have your silver status, you have your gold status, platinum status, or any type of hotel chain. And that might not sound sort of like the right approach, and there might not be a lot of banks that will sort of publicize that, but basically clients are segmented. You have a mass affluent client, or you have a small business, you have a large business, you have corporations and all that, what have you. Our primary focus in terms of my day-to-day task is sales size companies on an annual basis of about startup businesses up to about $25 million. So I see that as the sweet spot. I see that as the bread and butter that really makes the economy churn. We are coming off of some of the hardest, difficult times our country has ever seen. As I share with you, I spent a lot of my time the past year helping business owners try to keep their doors open. Had a lot of good businesses that had to basically close down, and family businesses that had to close. You look at the restaurant industries, you look at tourism, massive impacts. I truly believe, whether you look at Donald Trump, whether you look at Biden, I'm going to try to stay off the political stuff because that's another mess.
Yeah.
I had a sense, as a lot of people did, that the economy was already amped up, that there had already been, that there was a lot of good things that were taking place, and we can argue that, but that the economy was thriving before we got into this pandemic. Now that we're getting to the other side of that, you're seeing that economy start to quickly.
I'm sorry, I want to interrupt just for a second.
Yeah, please.
Was it real thriving, or was it like a bubble forming?
Yeah, so I believe that there was real thriving, right? I mean, like the stock market, of course, that's an indicator. But I spent a lot of time prior to going through the pandemic out on business calls. That's the best part of my job, where I have my day where I have 4 to 5 business owners that I'm meeting for lunch, or I'm meeting for coffee, or I'm going to tour their factory. I'm going to spend time with them. I'm talking to CFOs and accountants. So I have my sleeves rolled up, and I'm in those trenches hearing the conversations as to what's going on. Seeing how things are going in terms of supply, see how things are going in terms of, the type of demand that they have back in their business. So I felt like things were going fairly well, and then it all came to a screeching halt. Now, fast forward, I'm starting to get that sense again. I think in certain states, and I'm based in Florida, Florida, one of the indicators is the tourism side of things, and is also, if you look at the housing market now, we could also start to debate. Some people think that the governor here is a lunatic, and he's sort of like Trump, and he's out there. And some people think he's the best person ever. So Florida went about the pandemic definitely a lot different than a lot of states did. But I could tell you, Florida is absolutely booming right now. It's insane down here. The traffic's insane. The housing market's insane. The hotels are all booked. Restaurants are on the wait. I don't know if there's that same sense of optimism across our country. I'd probably say in California that might look and feel different, right?
Yeah.
But I do believe that there is this amped up type of energy out there that people want to get back to a sense of normalcy. People want to get back to scale and growing their business. People want to get back to running the family business that's been in, there for 100 years and has gone through some tough times, and they want to thrive again because they have those generations that they're going to pass them on to. So I believe that we're going to be in a state of really thriving for probably the foreseeable future. Now, the crapshoot there, something else can happen again, right? You get another type of virus out there, or something happens. Something happens in terms of the political scene. There's always the what ifs, but I believe as things stand where it's at right now is I do feel like that we're on an upswing. The part, especially as it falls back to Florida, that worries me is I've watched this movie before because I'm born and raised in South Florida, and I've seen where things go crazy and things go gung-ho and then come to a crashing halt. And so could that happen again? I think that the answer is yes, but I think that this cycle is going to last longer than, say, the cycle back in 2008 to 2010. And so, I think all of us are hoping and praying, especially for a lot of the folks that are listening here that might have a business. We need customers coming back and people that are, and putting money back into the, sort of the marketplace as well, too, so that people can be buying goods.
Now, what about hyperinflation? Do you think that that's something that we're going to have to deal with? I mean, obviously, we're seeing the prices of meat and lumber go crazy and whatnot. Do you think that it's just going to, cascade and turn into the hyperinflation?
Yeah, so I do worry just about the sheer amount of stimulus money and the sheer amount of money we've had to really inject back into the system, so to speak, to keep people afloat, to keep the businesses afloat. I mean, to just take a look at PPP, that was billions and billions and billions of dollars that was basically put out there. And so I worry about that, and I think all of us are feeling that, right? And in terms of the price of goods, in terms of our gas prices, if you look at the construction costs, I mean, those are going sky high, right? And so it does feel like to me that in terms of income, in terms of job opportunities and all that, we hope that comes back. But I mean, in places like Florida, we're having a tough time to get people back to work. A lot of the jobs are not really high-paying jobs just because of the tourism and restaurant, types of industries. Normally, that's some folks that are fresh out of college or maybe back in their teens or 20s, so to speak.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of restaurants that are on long waits, and they look around and say, wait a minute, I see a bunch of open tables. They can't get their staff to come back to work because a lot of these folks have been, sort of getting happy off some stimulus money and some other means of income, and they don't want to go back to work. And so I do think there needs to be this get back to work mentality, that we need to get people back into the office place. We need to get people active again. Now, it's funny to hear that from the guy that teaches social selling. In fact, tomorrow at the bank, I'm teaching another 100 folks on social selling. And so I do think, though, that there's elements of the pandemic that will carry over in terms of how people have been able to pivot on the virtual side and video conferencing and all those things. But I do think that it's priceless to be able to have the human-to-human physical interaction back in a workplace. So I think that the inflationary side of things, we're going to have to figure out, and I'm hoping that in terms of employers, that they can also think of ways outside the box, because there are going to be those folks, again, that maybe they can't come back to work for 5 days a week right now because, I don't know, there could be certain elements of the country that are still being homeschooled or still some things that they have to have someone take care of the kids. So I think that if you look at the side of employers, there will still have to be some flexibility as folks start to come back in the workplace.
Yeah, David M., he's down in Pensacola. He said restaurants are understaffed here. I hear what you're saying about people are taking a lot of, stimulus, but I also think a lot of the restaurants not having staff and that sort of thing is the fact that you had a lot of retirees that were working, while they were retired. Well, I mean, they're just going to stay home.
Sure.
They're not going to go out there and work. The same thing with the college kids or even the kids who were in high school that were working. They're going to stay home as well because, let's face it, there's still a virus out there floating around. Paul Besco wants to know, do you believe that we're going to have a financial reset of any kind?
Yeah. So I don't want to try to lead folks down a path, to go buy a certain stock or buy a certain good, so to speak. But I think that this sort of notion of an upswing, I do feel like it's going to last. How long? It's impossible to have a clear answer on that. I don't think that there's a reset forthcoming. I still think that there is a large population out there that are in sort of a wait and see mode as to what are we really going to get out of the administration back at the White House right now, right? Because, of course, obviously when you start to go through the campaign trail, you can make all sorts of promises, but what are we really going to see? What are, what type of things are they going to implement? Some of the challenges out there is just the sheer amount of stimulus money that's being put back out there, and you can argue that's good or bad. When we start to move folks up to $15 per hour, I believe from a banking standpoint, something like that's going to put a strain back on your business owners, especially those types of business owners that had a lot of seasonal workers. How are they going to be able to make that pivot to be able to pay folks more? the banking industry has seen that. So in fact, the Bank of America announced, and I want to say it's next year, that their tellers minimum pay will start off at $25 an hour. $25 an hour starting pay at Bank of America. That's crazy, right? And so that comes from a guy
money.
that worked.
That's good money.
That's great money. The $25 an hour, 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, heck. So those are the types of indicators. How are those corporations going to really adjust? Who is that going to move out now? Is that going to be a lot harder now for somebody to get that type of position? Because if you look at the income level from a salary standpoint, it's going up. What are the qualifications for those types of things? And then back on the business owner side, how can they really sustain if they're having to pay folks $15 an hour? And then the competition maybe does it for $17 an hour. So how are they going to keep that great talent, right? And so, those are still the questions that come sort of back in my mind. But I also look at the types of hobbies and the types of trends out there, and I'm certainly not trying to bore the entire group back on the line here, so to speak, but I'm a huge fan of sports cards. Sports cards right now, and I've had a sports cards, since I was a little kid, and now it's extremely booming. And I'm in the camp of the Gary Vees of the world, where I listen to the podcasts and all those things. And sports cards are taking off right now. So I also think about how can I hedge against any type of reset and be thinking about what can I really start to double down on that I think has a lot of upside. Now, you can start to get into cryptocurrency and all that stuff. To be completely candid, I haven't spent a lot of time on that. And as a banker, I truly need to. That part sort of scares me a little bit just because of the technology side and cyber attacks and fraud and all that. But sports cards, you go buy these sports cards now at X amount of price, and within 2 months, they've gone up a couple $100, and you go sell them off on eBay or some type of marketplace. And so I had my oldest son and I start up a company where we basically have a card shop, but it's a virtual shop where you can go online, you can go onto the virtual store, buy, sell, and trade cards. And so that entire type of industry and Pokemon and all that stuff has exploded. And so I think there's opportunities to sort of hedge your risk and hedge your bets, and sort of find those other streams of revenue. And I'm a huge fan of that. As I tell people all the time, you need to diversify your streams of revenue. You can't just have sort of that single source of income coming in. Think about what you're excited about or what your passion is, and find ways to turn it into some type of income opportunity for doing the right thing or trying to provide a good or service to somebody else.
Do you think that the companies that are, like, I guess the bigger companies, you mentioned Bank of America, are paying all this money because they know that the little guy won't be able to pay that much, therefore it'll put them out of business, and just give the bigger companies more and more control?
So I think that, it could be it. Right now, today, I want to say there's still about 5,000 banks left. And there are all sorts of folks that are saying in the next 3 to 5 years that'll probably be cut in half. So I do think that the M&A will start to pick up. We saw it in terms of BB&T and SunTrust. We've seen it with BBVA and PNC Bank. So I do think you'll start to see a lot more in terms of the mergers of the equals, is sort of what they call it from a PR standpoint. I think the challenge there also is that the bigger banks, they have the tech spend to be able to try different things, right? So Citibank just said that they're going to be rolling out a separate product solely focused on video banking, where on your phone at any given time, and they'll use the technology that's already out there, you're going to hit a button and your banker's going to pop up on your screen. You're working off of you're trying to get some work done in terms of your laptop, you're going to hit a button and your banker's going to come in there live with their video on and picture to help walk you through any type of situation you could be faced with, right? And so banks are getting smart about leveraging technology that's probably already out there, but turning it into a product. So now when you go into Citibank to open up if you want to open up a checking account, they're going to say, do you want us to opt you in to have your video banking as an option? And so I believe the whole banking game is going to be quickly changing in the next 3 to 5 years or so.
Yeah. Do you think it's a safe bet to put money in crypto? Do you think the banks are going to be moving towards a cryptocurrency?
Yeah. So that's the $1 million question.
Crypto?
So well, then back to my commentary on sports cards. So sports cards have something called blockchain, and it's the same thing. Blockchain, I can get if I look at a popular player's card, And the blockchain version, now the price of that card is starting to skyrocket. And so I still have a difficult time to comprehend that I don't physically have that card in hand. It's a part of my digital type of collection, right? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm still struggling with wrapping my head around all this. But there's a lot of economists out there and a lot of people out there that think we'll be in a cashless type of society, call it in the next probably decade or so. So I haven't gone down the path of investing into crypto. I do have friends that have, and they've done extremely well. And I've had others that have dabbled in some ones that really weren't established yet, haven't done so well. And I just personally have to do a better job to really start to dive deeper into what the world looks like, since it's evolving extremely quick.
Where do you think our biggest bubble in the economy is right now?
Just from being in Florida, I think it's the housing market, right? So that seems to always be the first to go, especially here in Florida. Florida goes as the housing market goes, and normally it's either boom or bust. So when the housing market's booming, everything's booming here. Right now, homes are being put on the market and sold for 10% more than what they're asking for within 72 hours, which is absolutely crazy. I think there's a stat out there now, 1,000 people per day are moving into Florida. Second fastest growing state behind Texas right now.
1,000 people a day?
1,000 people a day. 1,000 people a day are moving into Florida. Wow. So, that's a crazy stat. And, I talk to chambers of commerce. I look at the businesses that are being started and open. In fact, it's mind-boggling to me to see a lot of new businesses are coming online, and a lot of new concepts and franchises right on the heels of a pandemic. And so, that might feel good in terms of economy and sort of what's going on, but as soon as that bubble starts to burst, it goes south. It goes south extremely quick. So, if you look at places like Florida, we're either at the highest of highs or at the lowest of lows. And so I'm hoping we can ride this wave at the high for some time here. But it sort of feels like to me a little bit of how it felt back in 2009, that I kept thinking to myself, like, we're going to turn into California. Not in terms of the politics and all that stuff, but just in terms of the prices. I mean, if you look at like a Boca Raton in Palm Beach County, which is a great area, but before the housing boom, you can get called a 2,000 square foot house, maybe for $400,000. Now, if you want a 2,000 square foot house, a 3-bedroom and 2-bath, it's almost $1 million right now, almost $1 million. And so, I think we're getting to a price point now that folks are being outpriced, and now you're getting into bidding wars and all this stuff. So that will be the first to go because it typically is. And so that is definitely something to sort of keep an eye on.
Wow. So you did mention earlier that there's about 5,000 banks, and you meant 5,000 different banks in the United States right now, and you said that that's going to go down to half. What happens when it gets worse than that? What happens if we only have like 5 or 10 main banks in the country?
Well, I think it's people like me that will have to get a YouTube channel or do something full time and not just do something part time. There's going to be a lot of good talent out there that is going to have to pivot. And I brought up in terms of my oldest son several times on this session here today, and he says the same thing to me. He's like, "Dad, you'll be out of a job in 5 to 10 years." I'm like, "Oh, thanks, son. I really, I truly appreciate that." So I do, think at some point in time that the scale will go down instead of up in banks. Banking is, sort of viewed in terms of a commodity business, right? So all of us offer checking accounts, savings accounts, loans and CDs and so on and so forth. So back to what my commentary was, I'm trying to get our bank to be the first bank to really own the space of social selling. And I'll try to stay off my soapbox on this, but currently today, there is not a single bank that is going live on any platform. And you might think to yourself, well, Josh, what would a bank go live about? Like, banks are boring, right? Well, I believe that there's an opportunity to make banking fun. I believe there's an opportunity to educate externally more, right, to help clients, right? Think about going through the process of PPP. What if I had that bank's page that has 400,000 followers, and I went live on a Friday to talk about PPP? That is a bank doing a public service to educate masses of people. And then I can do the same thing to talk to business owners on how to protect their business from fraud. I can get some type of economist on there and talk about use on the economy. So I think there's tons and tons of ways to use social to help banks do a better job of branding, but to help banks really get back to how it was back in the day, and that's be the center point of the community. While it's going to be harder to do that physically, they can still do that socially.
Well, that's true. That's true. That'd be pretty neat, right?
Yeah.
So, I guess you mentioned cashless societies, and I got to bring this up because this is a big conspiracy theory. You know, if you go cashless, it just puts everybody. It puts everybody kind of everything that they do is going to be regulated, right? It's all going to be seen and looked at. You know, you couldn't buy something from your neighbor without Joe at the bank knowing about it, right? So, what do you think? Are there good sides to having a cashless society, or is it all bad?
Yeah, so I mean, being a banker, I always worry about the fraud because I've seen a lot of business owners just get hammered with all sorts of fraud that's taking place back in their account. And while there's protection the bank tries to put in place to sort of help with that, there's a lot of evil out there. And I think, especially as you look at the news lately, right, the past couple months, there's been a lot of cyber attacks. And so I do still think the bad guys are always going to still find a way to sort of figure that out. And so I think if you go totally to just focus on the technological side of banking and don't have still some type of alternative system to that, you put yourself in a lot of risk. And so while cash is seeming to be less and less, I still think it does serve a purpose. But the challenge is going to be, what can we do from a technology standpoint to give the consumer a better peace of mind? That if something does happen, that they're going to have some type of protection in place and not have to, go through months and months of paperwork and filling out all sorts of affidavits and all that kind of stuff.
All right. So if we go to a cashless society, being a Christian, aren't you concerned that, obviously they're talking about inserting chips into our hands? They're going to connect our bodies to the internet. That they're working on Neuralink. Putting our brains up into the internet. I mean, isn't that kind of the mark of the beast when some people say, right? Going to a cashless society and having it.
So I do worry about that. Those signs are always very difficult to figure out, to think about, could this be a sign of the end times, right? So I think all of us can go back to 2000, right? When we all thought as soon as the calendar turned, or I know that the Mayans were saying for a long time, like, here's the last day of Earth and here's the date. Everybody would freak out about that, right? So, it's hard for us to even say that what happens in the next 60 minutes. For those of us that truly have faith that Christ is going to come back someday, I mean, if that's the truth, if that is truly going to happen, the trumpets could sound right now, and the skies open up and heavens open up and the rapture occurs and all that great stuff, right? So it's very, very difficult to figure out where we are at in terms of the eternity calendar, if you want to call it that, to where our society is at sort of on that spectrum, right? And so I actually do believe that in our lifetime, I believe that Christ is going to come back. Now, that's just my personal thought.
In our lifetime?
Yes. So I don't have a lot of science that would prove out where I get that belief from, but it's just sort of an intuition. I'm not trying to be some type of Nostradamus, but I just believe in my lifetime that we will see Christ come back. But when that is, who knows? And then if that's not the case, then we'll figure out what happens after.
I think if we did go to a cashless society, that the people would come up with something. They would come up with something of their own. That,
sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well,
but I do believe that there's still going to always be bad out there, right? And it's back to my commentary that, if you have your set of faith and your set of beliefs, or if it's just somebody who they choose not to go that path, but they want to be a good person or want to do good sort of in the world, it's back on us to challenge ourselves to build that type of infrastructure, of course, that around us. And, this will sound corny again, but to have a sense of influence on others and try to have some positivity.
All right, so getting back to your book, Always Staying Positive, May 17th, the quote here says, "In a blink of an eye, your circumstances can change, thus why preparation is critical." It's true, right?
Yeah. And so that's back to this notion of we never know what's going to happen next, right? So I have my day scheduled, for the next few days out. Probably the same thing for all of the audience back on here. But something can happen. I mean, there could be a life event. There could be something that happens in terms of a loved one. We have to be as prepared as possible to make the best of the situation that we're dealt with. But there's a lot of this stuff, right? So all this motivation stuff and inspirational stuff and quotes and all that, all of this comes back to the commonality of what your type of mind state is. It's your choosing. It's when you get out of bed, it's how you choose to go about the day. It's your attitude. And you can take any medicine you want. You can drink the pain away. You can do all that kind of crap. But it's going to come down to what's going to get you excited to make the most of what you're facing. Knowing that, again, at the end of the day, you only have one shot. So it doesn't matter what your circumstance is, because all of us have been through ups and downs. It's going to be back on you as to what that choice is going to be. And that was the basis of this whole book. If there's something in there that sets off a trigger and you only read one quote and the book's put away for years and collects dust, it was worth me writing it. And if it was one person that got something out of it, it was worth me writing it. And it doesn't have to be my book, right? It could be if someone's reading the Bible, if someone's reading something else. It's just find whatever that is to help you, for those that might feel that they're down and out, to at least give yourself another shot. Because everybody has earned a second chance, deserves a second chance. And there's people that took a lot of chances on me. And I've only been successful because someone took a chance on me. And I went through a lot of down and out times. And so it's just find where that comes from. If it comes from faith, awesome. If it comes from somewhere else, find an opportunity to have that, sort of peace, love, and positivity. And people think they can't make a difference, but you can make a difference. You can make a difference. They could start with one person and start some type of chain reaction there. So,
yeah, when a butterfly flaps its wings, right? It isn't that the old saying?
Yeah.
When a butterfly flaps its wings, a hurricane is coming on the other side of the planet, something like that.
There you go. Yeah.
every reaction has a reaction. So
there you go.
So you have to actually get up and kind of just do it. You really just have to do it. You have to put all your anxieties aside, and you have to go out there and you have to do it. And that's what got us to episode 100. And Josh, you had something you wanted to tell all the listeners. You have a giveaway or something you wanted me to share?
So two quick things. So, great job on this platform on trying to have an outlet for folks to have a spirit of candor, be open about the content, but getting to 100 episodes is awesome. So congratulations to you. Congrats to all of the audience that has been along for the ride, so to speak. And I'm going to leave you all with, I said two things, I'm sorry, three things. So that was one. Two more. My favorite quote is not even my quote. Mark Twain says, the two most important days of your life is when you're born and when you find out why. So just let that sink in. The two most important days in your life is when you're born and when you find out why. And then the final thing is, I have my book. I'm not trying to push the sales or any of that kind of stuff, but if I can get the next 5 people in the comment section, and I'll be going back on there shortly, to just let me know that they want the book, I would love to just send you a free copy. So if you're finding your place, if you find yourself right now sort of in a place that you want some type of motivation, some type of inspiration, let this be that source for you. I'd be happy to help. Would love to put that out there for the entire group. But the next 5 people that can put back in the chat quotes for the soul, I'll be more than happy to send you out a free copy. And I hope that everyone benefited from our dialogue here today.
All right, awesome. And where can everybody find the book? Just so everybody knows, I did put a link in the description box below. And if you want a copy of the book, the first 5 people who comment quotes for the soul right now in the chat will get a free copy of the book. Come on, chat. Let's get going. All you have to do is put quotes for the soul, and you'll get a free book. So go ahead and do it.
So you can find it off of Amazon. And then if you want to look at the website, it's soulsofinfluence.com. If you want to learn more about things in terms of the non-for-profit, it's athletesofinfluence.com. So soulsofinfluence.com is my publishing brand, and Athletes of Influence is a non-for-profit sports program.
Awesome. And I guess so. I guess we're just going to get going here. So we still have a few more books to give away. Send me an email at info@conflictradio.com. And looks like Paul Beska is getting a free book. So if you, Paul, send me an email, info@conflictradio.net. I mean, .net, not .com, .net. info@conflictradio.net. And send me your address, and I'll make sure that you get that book. Josh, thanks a whole lot for coming on, man. We sure do appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I truly wish you all health and peace and happiness out there. And if I could be of any assistance, I'm not hard to find. In fact, as you look at those websites, if you have further questions or if I could be of any assistance to anyone out there, I'm here. And so that's what life's all about. It's finding opportunities to help folks and meet them where they're at. So thank you so much again to have this opportunity to share our message today.
All right. And Paul Bleska's in Australia, so that free
Paul,
book.
I guess I'll pick up those shipping costs. That's going to be expensive out to Australia. But I tell you what, Paul, you spread the good word out there. And I will look forward to coming out there someday.
Yeah, maybe you could just bring it to him. You get him up and meet him somewhere, and just.
I can crash at Paul's house. He'll save me a lot of money on the hotel fees over there.
There you go. All right, Josh, just hang out for a second, and let me go ahead and close this out. Remember, everybody, you can always find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on all of your normal podcast catchers. We're doing really good in the United Kingdom on Apple iTunes. I think we're ranked number 6 over there under category of entertainment news. So yay. Be sure to give us a good review. Let us know where you're from over on Apple iTunes, because we are getting a ton of more listeners over there than we ever have dreamed about getting on YouTube here. So great job, everybody over there in the UK. That's going to do it for us. That's episode 100, everybody. We'll be back on Thursday with Peter Robbins is going to be talking. We're going to be talking about alien abductions with Peter Robbins. So definitely check that out on Thursday. And until next time.